It's more than just another radio show. It's a beacon of truth. Fasten your seatbelt and find out why they call Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers the dynamic deacon. Join Deacon Harold for a fast-paced hour that sheds encouraging light on today's culture. Welcome to Beacon of Truth with your host, Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Beacon of Truth. I am your host, Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers, and you're listening on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Starting off another week of great shows here on Beacon of Truth on Labor Day. That's right, the day that we everybody gets a day off from work. Well, most of us. There's physicians and emergency management workers and law enforcement and firemen who are always working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so we're grateful to them. Those in the military, of course, we're grateful to everyone on this Labor Day are laboring to keep us safe and to keep things moving. So we're grateful to you. And just want to share a few reflections on work. Now, typically work kind of has a negative context to it because like, oh man, I got to go to work today, or it's Monday, and then you get to Wednesday, it's hump day, and so it work seems like kind of like a drudgery in a sense. And why is that? Well, it goes all the way back to the garden and the temporal punishments for sin, because after the fall, there were two effects of sin. There was the eternal loss of heaven, or with the loss of heaven, not eternally, because Jesus came and redeemed that. And there was the loss of heaven, which is the eternal punishment of sin. And then there was the temporal punishment of sin, the earthly effects of sin. And for the woman that was painful childbearing and that her husband will rule over her, not lead her to heaven, but to dominate her. And then for the man, it was, the sweat of his brow and, digging his hands in the earth and, working hard in order for the earth to bring forth its fruit. And so work on the surface could seem to be a negative thing, but when we look at work in light of our faith, we look at work in light of redemption, we see it really as a participation in the suffering of Christ. A participation in redemptive work, right? Redemptive work that Christ did for us on the cross. And it is through work that not only that we earn a living, but also through which God is able to use the gifts that he gave us for his honor and for his glory. So even though we lost some gifts because of the fall and work became something of a trial and of drudgery, it also can be a participation in the redemptive work of Christ, right? So a little different way to look at work today as we begin this week on Beacon of Truth. And also very excited to have a great guest on today. We'll talk to him shortly. Good friend of mine, Nick de LaTorra. We did a podcast together called The Prodigal Life, and now we're both on to doing different things now. But Nick is just a great guy, fantastic work that he's doing in the life of the church, and I wanted you guys to get to meet him and get to know him. Fascinating conversion story as well. Hopefully, will give hope to all you parents out there whose kids are away from the church, So, and Nick has an amazing wife, great family, and so we'll be talking to him today on Beacon of Truth. And also just want to acknowledge some great folks working behind the scenes to bring you this show every single day. The great quality that you hear is because of people like Matt Gabinski screening calls and Charles Berry doing social media, and our producer of all producers, Ace McKay. Ace, how you doing, bro?
I'm good, man. I love that Labor Day we're laboring, but ready for like the grill. Like, this is like the end of the summer. But the thing for me, is like, I remember as a kid, like we had Memorial Day to Labor Day was summer, and like my kids have already been in for like 2.5 weeks. So it's like the summer got shorter. So it's almost kind of anticlimactic. We're like, it's just a 3-day weekend for most.
Yeah, because you're right. School used to start after Labor Day. That was kind of the official start of school. But you know what? I kind of like this a system where kids are starting earlier in school now.
Yeah.
It always had been before that if you're going to college started earlier than Labor Day. I remember when I was in college, traveling in August to go back to school, every year. And then, of course, and then the grade school, high school would start after Labor Day. But I like the fact that there's not that much of a gap now in the summer.
Sure.
Because for 3 months, basically you sit around and do nothing, as unproductive, you're not learning anything. And, other countries like Australia, has a system where they have 10 weeks on, 2 weeks off, 10 weeks on, 2 weeks off, 10 weeks on. Then they have a month off for Christmas, like the Christmas holidays, which of course for them is summer, right?
Sure.
That's their summertime in December and January. I like that system because they're not out of school that long, so they're not losing anything that they've learned. They're not idle for too long. Parents are able to plan vacations or time off from work based on this schedule because they know exactly when the time is coming. So I like that, and so I'm glad that obviously we've not shifted to that kind of system, but at least we have more time for kids to be in school and not so idle. So I like that.
So on holidays like this, are you the grill master?
No, you know what? I'm not much into grilling. I mean, which is weird. Because we did grill when we were growing up in Jersey.
Yeah.
During the summer, we'd grill a lot, like hot dogs and burgers and stuff like ribs and stuff like that. And I used to love to help grill,
Sure.
but I don't know. It's just, no, it's so when I'm home, like during the summertime with my schedule, I don't travel that much during the summer, except for this summer was crazy busy. But when normally I'm home more, and I do grill, but it's not like, oh, I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait to get these brats on, and it's more like just helping out my wife and stuff.
Sure.
We usually have a garden party during the summer. We invite friends that we haven't seen for a long time. In fact, some of the friends we only see during that garden party.
Right.
And I grill and stuff and help serve and things like that. But other than that, I'm not. It's like not in my blood, to grill. I'm not saying I don't like to. It's just like, I know people that grill like all the time, even during the winter time. They're grilling. That's just it's just part of who they are.
Well, and that's how I grew up. Is my dad was he was grilling, and my friends all came over, or family was in town, or whatever. But as an adult, my dad and I, living proximity close to each other, it's a battle of, well, this year we're coming to your house, or next year you're coming to my house. Like because he's a smoker, and I'm just I like my gas grill. Like I want to eat it, I want it to taste great, but I don't want it, the charcoal thing, which is the way we did it as a kid. That just takes too long. Like I don't have the time, and like I want to eat my food. If something's weird with the charcoal and it doesn't light right, that's just a lot. But there's that, and then the homemade ice cream, like the hand cranked ice cream. That says Labor Day to me.
Oh, that's awesome! I love that. And I remember a very good Labor Day memory was going to play with my little garage band. Like I grabbed my Yamaha SBG 200 and my little amp, and I take it over to Tyrone's house, and
Nice.
and in Newark, and we literally played in his garage, and then if the weather was bad, we played in his basement. But we just plug in, and our keyboard player Jermaine, who ended up marrying her actually, and they have a couple of kids together now. But but Tyrone was a very talented guy, man. He multi-instrumentalist. And then Jermaine played keyboards, and we had so Tyrone would play bass, and then and then Vaughn Jones would play drums, and we just had a great time just playing covers and making music together. Man, it was just some great memories for me. And the thing is, I'm self-taught on guitar, so sometimes they have to be patient with me because I'm learning as I go.
Right.
kind of a thing, and there's no internet back then, so you just can't look on
True.
YouTube and figure out the tab, which I liked. You actually had to listen to the song and learn.
Sure.
If you hear a technique being played
Yeah.
and you couldn't see how they were doing it, you had to figure it out.
Yeah.
Like how can I make that happen? Make it sound like that. So you had to figure it out. I like that, the interplay there.
Well, there's something about a
so-
Labor Day crowd on a patio while they're having wings and beer or whatever, and fireworks maybe at the end of the day. They're rowdier than any crowd you play all summer.
Yeah, that's right. We listen to Beacon of Truth, and today we're talking to a great guest, Nick LaTorra on Beacon of Truth. You want to be part of the program? Send us an email, beacon@EWTN.com.
Here we go.
Yeah. Woo!
That's a good Labor Day
on
song.
Labor Day today.
Yeah.
It is. See, a song like that will get me on the grill.
Yeah.
That'll motivate me to get out there and
If I had known
kill
all
something
along,
and
we
then
could have been fired
fry it
up
up and eat it.
an hour ago.
I love that, man. It's like definitely James Brown or Prince, obviously heavily influenced by James Brown. Just love that groove, man.
Yeah, well, you got
That is
Bruno
awesome.
Mars. Like the list goes on and on now. Everybody's
Oh,
influenced
yeah,
by
yeah.
James.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That is so awesome. Love that. Well, you listen to Beacon of Truth. I'm your host, Deacon Harold Sivers, and it's Labor Day today. And even though many people have a day off, hopefully you're sitting back and relaxing today, maybe doing some grilling, listening to some great music, and listening to our show today, Beacon of Truth. And just want to remind you that I have some amazing pilgrimage opportunities coming up in next year. In 2025, you just go to my website, deaconharold.com. You click on the pilgrimages tab at the top there, and you just scroll down. You see all the great opportunities. Two I want to highlight. We're doing Mary and the Saints. That's Portugal, Spain, and France, May 10th to the 20th. And Father John Paul Mary, one of the MFVA friars from EWTN, Father John Paul's coming with us on that trip. And then we're going to stay in France for another week and tour all around France. So that's another great opportunity. We are also doing later that month, May 28th to June 8th, we're having Father Francis Mary from EWTN. And we're going to be doing the footsteps of St. Paul and the early church. We're going to Greece and Turkey during that trip. So that's going to be an amazing opportunity. And we'll also be going to Poland and Hungary and the Czech Republic in August. We're praying. We have something scheduled for the Holy Land, but in October, but we're not sure. We have to wait and see what's going on in the region there. Keep praying for peace. And then the Eucharistic Miracles of Italy, which will be going in October 20th to 30th in 2025. So check us out there, deaconharold.com, and click on the Pilgrimages tab.
Of course, as you enjoy your Labor Day, maybe you're looking to catch up on some of your favorite EWTN TV and radio shows. Make sure you find us on YouTube, because it's easy to just search EWTN, and it could be anything from live events to devotionals, homilies, Beacon of Truth. The list goes on and on. But again, while you're on YouTube today, just search EWTN and enjoy.
All right. Well, it's time to break open God's Word in the Psalms in this Soulful Psalms segment of Beacon of Truth. And what's awesome is that this segment of the show is its own podcast. That's right. You can go to Podcast Central at EWTN.com or on Spotify or SoundCloud or iTunes, whatever your favorite podcast medium is. And you can find the Soulful Psalms there. So download it and listen every day to these reflections on the Psalms to make your experience at Mass and experiencing the Psalms and the Holy Sacrifice of the Word of God more deeply in your life. Well, today we're going to finish up Psalm 1, the very first psalm in the book of sung praises, the Sefer Telachim. And of course, all these are attributed to David. We looked at the first couple verses. Now we're going to try and finish off the rest of this psalm. So there's no prescript here in this psalm at all. We'll start at verse 3. Now, this is talking about a man who was blessed, right? And so it continues. This man who was blessed, he is like a tree that is planted beside the flowing waters and yields its fruit in due season, whose leaves shall never fade, and all that he does shall prosper. So again, David starts off the book of the Psalms with what he does commonly in many of these Psalms, especially the Psalms in this first book of the Psalms. He aligns the Psalms with paralleling it with something in nature, right? He makes a connection between God's working in our lives and nature, God's creative power and creative activity in the world. And here it's like a tree. So you have a tree that's flowing by water. So it's constantly receiving a water source, right? Because, trees need water. They'll go down into the roots that feed the rest of the tree system. And so if it's by the flowing waters, it's always drawing from those waters. Like Jesus, the woman at the well, let me give you, the water that you're drinking, that's going to last for a while. But what I'm going to do, the wellspring of eternal love that I want to give you, you will never be thirsty again. And she says, give me this water always. So this little psalm is like a precursor to Christ, who is the living water. And we will drink from that wellspring forever and will never thirst again. Once we drink deeply from the wellspring of God's incredible mercy and love. And he continues, not so are the wicked, not so. For they, like winnowed chaff, shall be driven away by the wind. Right? So the chaff is like, I'm not a farmer, but I've been on enough farms and traveled enough in the course of my work in the Lord's vineyard to see that when they harvest the crops, sometimes there's this chaff, the dry leaves or that goes around the plant. When it's harvested, those things blow away. They have to, and Jesus talks about separating the wheat from the chaff, right? So the chaff has to be separated out, so only the good grain is left. Well, again, this psalm is pointing toward that again. So those are not like those who are wicked are not like the tree that's drawing from the wellspring of God. They're like the tree that's in the desert, and they're cut off, not because God cuts them off, because they cut themselves off, right? And they blow away in the wind. Then he ends, when the wicked are judged, they shall not rise, nor shall sinners in the council of the just. For the Lord knows the way of the just, but the way of the wicked will perish. So David brings it all together at the end. So he again uses the analogy of nature and plants and trees to describe this relationship of drawing from God's love as opposed to away from God's love. And then at the end, he says, those who are wicked will not stand. So the chaff is going to be blown away in the face of God's justice. But those who are righteous will stand forever. So a great lesson for us today from David in the Psalms. So now I want to bring in another man who is just, and that is my good friend, Nick LaTorra. Now, what's interesting about Nick, if those of you who are watching today, you would never guess that he's classically trained in opera. He was trained to become an opera singer, and now he's not doing opera anymore, but he's still praising the Lord by playing music and speaking and doing all kinds of amazing things. So I'd like to introduce you to Nick LaTorra. Nick, welcome to Beacon of Truth, my friend.
Oh, Deacon Harold, good Deacon. It is great to be here.
All right. Awesome. Well, what we do on this part of the show, Nick, is typically many listeners may not be familiar with the guests that I have on. So why don't you just share a little bit about your story, so that people can get to know you and kind of enter into your experience a little bit.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, man, I like many people, many cradle Catholics, I was brought up in a home. We prayed rosaries. We would go to adoration as a family occasionally. Actually, I think weekly we went to adoration, and we were super Catholic, whatever that means, right? As super Catholic as a lot of Catholics think they might be. But underneath all of that stuff in my household, there was a lot of, I would say, diabolic things taking place, because the summer after my fourth grade year in elementary school, my parents got a divorce, and it just absolutely wrecked me. I ended up becoming a terrible student when I was a great student. I was very extroverted and artistic and creative, and I became very introverted and depressed, chronically depressed. That began in fifth grade for me. And it just became a mess. And I very soon after entered into a number of addictions, and it was just no bueno, as they say. Fast forward several years, because I know we have a confined amount of time here. In college, God did an incredible work in me, where I was exposed to the theology of the body. I was tricked into going to a presentation that Dr. Christopher West was giving on campus, and I met him that night, and he just completely wrecked my world in the best way. And truly, very literally, overnight, I was head over heels for Jesus Christ, blessed be his name, and the Catholic Church. And 3 months later, I was teaching a confirmation class at the local parish, and I went from, in the span of my life, the journey, I raised Catholic, became a Protestant. In that time, I also experimented with the occult, and then I became an atheist, and then coming back, I also was kind of experimenting with the occult again in the context of the New Age mysticism, and then I became a Protestant again, and then finally Catholic, and that stuck. So yeah, it's been a wild ride, and I think the biggest takeaway, because I saw how my parents' hearts were breaking in the context of that journey, and kind of what you alluded to earlier, Deacon, never give up, because even if your child or your spouse or another family member, a friend, even if it seems really dark and really challenging and like there's no hope, we worship a God of miracles. We worship a God who, one of the gifts of being in relationship with him ought to be hope, even in the midst of darkness.
Wow, that's awesome, man. I love that. And what we want to do on the other side, when we come back for our longer segment together, we want to talk about maybe a little bit more detail of that, like exactly what it was that God moved in your heart, and then how that translated into what you're doing now.
Sure.
How do you go from wanting to sing opera, to the amazing work that you're doing in the Lord's vineyard now? So we'll talk about the different things you're doing, the music, how, again, we talk about music a lot on Beacon of Truth. That's kind of like we want to bring people to a deeper love of Jesus Christ and the Catholic faith. That's the goal of the show. But we do it in fun kinds of ways. And Ace and I and you, we're all musicians, right? So music is a very important part of how of our lives, either directly in the work that we do in ministry or our apostolates, or influencing us in how we approach our faith, right? So I want to talk about the influence of music in your life, and then specifically talk about the apostolates that you're doing, and then of course how people can get in contact with you as well. Well, you're listening to Beacon of Truth, and I'm your host, Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers. So great to be with you today on Labor Day, participation in God's plan of salvation. You want to be with us today? Would love to hear from you. Send us an email, beacon@EWTN.com. All right, that's some good Labor Day music here. I like that.
You could lay anything over the top of that right there.
Yeah, a little break there. Very nice.
It's the improv break that gives you that like goosebump up the back of your neck,
Yeah, I like that. I like that. And we got our friend the cowbell back.
That's right. Labor Day, you need more cowbell, right?
Yeah, more
You
cowbell.
never have enough.
More cowbell. You know, I got this. There's some. I'm sure there's some listeners and viewers who don't get that reference at all. They're too young.
Just Google it. It'll come up.
Yeah, you show you how old we are, right?
It's true. It shows
We
daily.
listen to Beacon of Truth. Yeah, there you go. Listen to Beacon of Truth. I'm your host, Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers. You're listening on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. We're having a great conversation with my friend and fellow evangelist, Nick LaTorra. Just shared with us an incredible story about how God came into his life. We're going to explore a little bit more of that, as well as the work that he's doing today in the Lord's vineyard. You want to be with us today? Would love to hear from you. Send us an email, beacon@ewtn.com.
Of course, Mother Angelica live tomorrow night, 8 Eastern, getting a lot of her wisdoms and, of course, her wit, which was always my favorite side of Mother. You can check it out as well on demand. Just go to EWTN.com/podcast and stream anytime.
All right. Well, we're talking with Nick LaTorra, who started off as a classically trained vocalist studying opera. And when he encountered the Lord, he was working as a youth minister and then a church music director, pastoral associate, and then director of marriage and family life for the Diocese of Toledo. Right. And then he started Awaken Catholic and was doing a number of incredible podcasts. And boy, I'd love to hear more about Nick's story. Nick, welcome back to Beacon of Truth. Now, you started off singing opera. First of all, what started your interest in music? And then when you wanted to study music formally, why opera?
Great question, Deacon. So all of my life, I was kind of an entertainer. I started off in theater, actually, not even musical theater, just theater. I was, stage acting. And I was doing that as a child and lip syncing at talent shows. I literally had no idea that I had any proclivity for vocal performance, any natural talent. I had no idea I could sing until high school, and I discovered it accidentally. So I would always, if I was doing something musical, I was lip syncing all throughout my childhood. When I entered high school, I wanted to get as many easy A's as possible because, again, I was a terrible student. So I'm looking at the lineup of classes I can register for. I see freshman choir. Hey, that's probably a pretty easy A. So I go and I do the audition, and the choir director, Jim Brown, God rest his soul, he asks me, hey, what did you bring to sing today? I said, I was supposed to bring something. I don't know how this works. He's like, well, are there any musicals you like? Okay, Phantom of the Opera is kind of cool, even just conceptually. Okay. So he whips out Music of the Night. I happen to be quasi-familiar with the song. Okay. So he sits at the piano, he starts playing it, and then I start singing, and he stops playing, and he turns around, he's like, you've never done this before? I was like, no, I don't know. And so and he's like, that's $1 million voice. And I said, so like an A? Does that work? No, but as it turns out, and I had known this, I actually am in a lineage of opera singers. When my mom's grandfather came from Spain to South America, it was in the context of an opera troupe or whatever they're called, where they would travel around South America performing operas. And so he was a professional opera singer. My grandfather is an incredible opera singer, and it kind of skipped a generation, and here I am. And so actually, from what I understand, my voice when I'm singing opera is like literally the same as my grandfather and my great-grandfather, which is pretty cool. But yeah, so I accidentally discovered that, and I, as someone that was chronically depressed and someone that was addicted and someone that didn't feel like I had meaning, to discover that I was special in this way was an identity that I quickly latched onto. So in my high school, I kind of became the guy. In my town, I became the next Josh Groban, is what they were, a lot of people were calling me. So that kind of became an opportunity for Vice, because I was very attached to this idea that I was the guy. I had the best voice in the world, and I was and as it turns out, like, things became pretty easy for me in that arena because I didn't even have to work hard at it, and I was just like better than everyone else at it. And I got scholarships for it. I actually, in high school, started studying with the university professors in that area, and then I just continued in that into college with them. with scholarships and stuff. So it's, you know, if I cared more about that tract, then I wouldn't be saying the things I'm saying, because like I would obviously sound terribly prideful, but honestly, I'm ashamed of what that did for me in many ways, because it made me a worse person. I wanted to glorify myself. I became my own God, right? So, yeah.
Wow. So you moved away from the opera, but you're still very musical. I mean, in your talks and in the work of your apostolate, you still, I mean, you play guitar, and your wife, beautiful singer. And you guys also do things together, you create songs, and so music still is a very much part of what you're doing, right? How do
Yeah.
you weave that into the work that you're doing now?
That's a great question. So first of all, you're right. My wife is a way better, way more talented musician than I am, and she makes anything I'm doing sound a lot better. Both of us are multi-instrument. We both play guitar, piano, except she also plays violin and fiddle, and she can pick up a cello and make amazing things happen. But for me, my primary instrument is my voice, and so I actually had to go, in the context of my conversion or reversion back to faith, I had to go a period of time totally relinquishing any music, because I needed to recalibrate doing it for God's glory and not for my glory. So I literally had to like go cold turkey, stop. And that was hard, because it was so attached to my identity that it was part of the need for me to die to my old self, right? Like St. Paul says, it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. Like I needed to allow the fruit of faith to grow untarnished and unaffected by the weeds of what had been. So as our current vice president says, you know, to not be, how does she say it? To not be restricted by what has been, or something like that. Yeah. But so that it was hard for me, but when I did come back to it, it was in a very humble setting, leading worship for the nights of worship at the university parish in town, the same university that I was attending. And I did it without a light on me. I did it like in the darkness, and I didn't want it to be about me. I was out of sight, out of mind. It was just about worshiping and adoring the Lord. And that was very healing. Yeah.
And
So
that was
now my
during-
wife and I compose music today, and we have music out there on Spotify and YouTube. We have some music videos, and we're so passionate. We met in the context of music. We met at a talent show in high school, so music is deeply part of our relationship, which also made kind of that reversion difficult, because she was, you know, attached to me with music very deeply, but then also she was Protestant, like Protestantly Protestant. And so my conversion and relinquishing of music for a period, like it was a hot mess, but glory to God, because he has made beautiful things come out of ugly things.
Oh man, that's so awesome. And so when you're doing those nights of worship, that was in Eucharistic adoration, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I love that. Um, and so now you're with you end up marrying her, right?
Oh,
And
I did.
when did she come to the Catholic faith?
Great question. When I reverted and I was like super gung ho Catholic guy, she was not super thrilled about that. And she attended the same Christopher West event that I did. She went with me, but that drove her further away from Catholicism. And basically we broke up. She couldn't foresee a future raising children with someone that was Catholic, right? And so we broke up for about a year, and in that time I discerned priesthood. I briefly dated someone that I thought was a good Catholic girl, and I was wrong. And it was a difficult time, but in that time that we were apart, she, thinking that we would never get back together, we were done. I was down the priesthood tract. I was with this other girl for a short time. So not for me, not to be with me. She was haunted by the things she learned about Catholicism and the holes that she discovered in Protestantism. And she was haunted by this, and she started discerning Catholicism on her own for herself in that time. And so she ended up going through 3 RCIA processes before she took the plunge finally. And she entered the church, I think the year before we got married. Yeah.
Wow, beautiful. So let's talk about some of the work that you're doing now. You listen to Beacon of Truth. I'm your host, Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers. And today we're having a great discussion with my good friend and fellow evangelist and musician, Nick de LaTorra, who has a great apostle called Awaken Catholic. He's a speaker and an author. And we're talking about the work that he's doing in the Lord's Vineyard. So tell us now about the roots of Awaken Catholic and what motivated you to start this apostolate, and what kinds of things is Awaken Catholic doing, to continue to bring the faith to people and help people truly encounter our Lord Jesus Christ, the Catholic faith, in a deep and personal way.
Sure, it's deeply connected to my conversion or my reversion. That pivotal night at the Christopher West event on campus. So as I mentioned, the source of a lot of my wounds and trauma really stemmed from my parents' divorce. But really, even beyond that, it was fracturing before that to lead to that point, right? So there was an unhealthy thing going on that I was oblivious to in a conscious way. But so many of my wounds were about family. So many of my wounds were about marriage, about relationships, and about sexuality. Like I said, I developed a lot of addiction to sexual in nature, and to begin with, anyways. And when I discovered the theology of the body, even just at the onset, just the little taste I got at that event, it rocked my world. I had never heard anybody in any denomination that I had spent time in, even in secular contexts, I had never heard anybody present such a cohesive vision and cohesive and beautiful vision of the gospel in a way that it spoke so directly to the heart of the human experience, which is relational. Like, we are meant for relationship with each other, with God. And even there's the sense in which we have a relationship with ourselves. How do we see ourselves? How do we understand what we are? And how do we operate in the world and in our relationships with others based on that? And I was just wrecked that night. And then he also said something that at face value was very frustrating because of who I was at the time. He talked about how less than 100 years ago, every Christian denomination on the planet agreed, if they agreed on anything, it was that the use of artificial contraception was intrinsically evil, the use of it. Now, again, I was annoyed by this because of who I was at the time and what my sinful nature was about. But that stood out to me because one of the things that led me to atheism was, in fact, the fracturing of the Christian family, the many denominations, everyone pointing to the same book for truth, but coming up with different versions of it. So I had lost the concept that faith had any validity, when in contrast, we can measure a table, everyone look at the ruler and see the same number. That looks like objective truth to me. And so what he presented then, and he even slipped in this statement about the reason that the Catholic Church is the only church that still teaches that the use of artificial contraception is intrinsically evil, is the preservation of truth via the apostolic succession and the magisterium of the church and the papacy. And he just slipped that in super casually, but that caught my attention because I was so hungry for truth. So he was presenting to me on this night the notion that maybe there is objective truth in faith and meaning in the context of theology of the body, meaning for myself, meaning for family, meaning for relationships, meaning in my relationship with God, like meaning and truth. And I was absent this, and it was a wound for me. So I went home and I just started devouring content online. Actually, I went through this stint where I watched so much Mother Angelica. She was like a surrogate grandmother for me. And I just started reading book after book, and I was just head over heels, like I said. But because what I experienced was this almost violent awakening, like an unleashing of an awakening in my life, where all of the sacraments I had received as a child and all the pent up, stored up grace that I had received was unleashed and awakened in me. And I wanted, because I understood so directly in my experience what led to letting go of faith, what led to walking away, what led to not understanding the role of the sacraments in my life, even as I was participating in them. I wanted to devote my life. I felt this compelling conviction to devote my life to helping other people discover that awakening, that unleashing of their graces that had been maybe so largely the revert, the potential revert is my personal target audience. But then even in the context of Alina, my wife's conversion, also helping others who are not Catholic discover the glory that awaits them behind the doors of a Catholic church. So we started this apostolate, and I had over the years, I'd been getting asked more and more to speak at this conference or that retreat or whatever around the country. And it came to a tipping point because I was doing that while working at parishes. I was doing that while working for the Diocese of Toledo. And my supervisors, the priests, the bishop, everyone I ever worked for was super supportive of it because they understood my charism personally. But it did come to a point where Alina and I had to begin discerning, what are we going to do here? Because we're having a hard time balancing our family life, and you're the director of marriage and family life, and we need to make sure that things are right at home first, right?
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson's clean your own bedroom first. So we entered into this 3-month discernment period, and we did so with my supervisor because, again, he was super supportive of all of this. And I was doing some work late at night one evening, and my wife comes down to my studio in the basement. She says, Nick, it's time. And there was so much peace about it. And I turned to her and said, okay. So I walked into my supervisor's office the next morning, and I said, it's time. It's just like my wife had said. And he's like, okay, let's announce it at staff today. And so we launched this apostolate, Awaken Catholic, that really is meant to be a way to expand on my personal charism on a larger format. So we've engaged with different creators and speakers and musicians, and that's the context in which you and I were hosting a podcast at one point. And yeah, it's just been amazing what God has been doing. And so, like, even you mentioned I'm an author. The book that I wrote is called The Eucharist, The Ultimate Love Story Unveiled. And it's meant to be the beginning of a series of small books. It's a very pocketable, very holdable book that you can share easily. That's the idea. It's meant to be the beginning of a series called The Ultimate Love Story Unveiled. And why am I talking about the Eucharist this way and any other topic? Even when I do, the next book is going to be on Mary and the Saints. Why is it that Mary and the Saints is about the ultimate love story unveiled? Because at the heart of it, which is what I learned through theology of the body, thank you so much, Pope St. John Paul II. At the heart of all of it is this relationship, this nuptial union that we're not only, like, we got a taste of it in our marriages here on earth, but it's all just this little taste of the incredible nuptial union that we are destined for with God as his bride here. So that's why, like, any truth that the Catholic Church proposes is meant to point to this nuptial union. And that's why the whole series is going to be about that. And that's my charism. And when I'm going and I'm preaching a mission or a retreat, I led a retreat earlier this year for a men's conference that was somewhere in Ohio. But all of it, I am weaving in these ideas that are undergirding the entirety of the gospel, which is theology of the body.
You're listening to Beacon of Truth. I'm your host, Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers. You're listening on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. And I know that there are parents out there that are watching or listening going, man, I wish this dude could talk to my son right now or my daughter who's away from the church. I'm sure they're sitting with their jaws hitting the floor going, what? How could God do this in Nick's life? And, I wish he could do the same thing in my children's life. Because, Nick, because you travel and speak like I do, you always run into parents or grandparents whose hearts are broken because their children
Every time
are away from the church. That's the most common thing, challenge that I find when speaking is the pain, the heartbreak, the tears that you hear from parents and grandparents about their kids being away from the church. And they're trying to, well, what is that spark that will get them to really turn their life around, to participate? Is it says, as you alluded to, Revelation 19, verse 9, blessed are those who are invited to the wedding feast of the Lamb, where Christ, the eternal bridegroom, will be giving love and life to his bride forever in heaven. And the sacrament of matrimony is a microcosm of what that relationship will look like in heaven here on earth. right? So that's awesome. And
Amen.
so are you still incorporating music then as part of Awaken Catholic? And when you're giving talks, are you playing or are you just speaking, or what's the balance there?
Sure. When I do a mission or any event, it kind of depends on the context of that event. So usually, if I'm just going and preaching a mission, I will integrate music. If I do a 2 or a 3 night mission, we end the mission with a time of Eucharistic adoration in which I lead some musical worship. And then I also integrate music a couple times throughout the presentations. But there are also other events where there is already music in place, or they don't need music and it doesn't make sense to provide music, and I just speak in those occasions. And then other times I show up and what I am there to do is music. My
Well,
wife and I can
remember
go
that
ahead.
we that one time that when we were together doing the podcast, we went out and we uh met with that group in front of the abortion
Oh, yes.
facility, right? And we were praying, and you played music. That was part of it. As part of the our witness out there.
Yeah, that's one
So
of the
that's
commitments I've
beautiful.
made in the context of making sure I'm doing things for the right reasons. I made a commitment to the Diocese of Toledo and Catholic Charities that I will never, unless I absolutely cannot make it work schedule wise, I will never say no to them if they need me to lead worship, lead music for one of their prayer vigils at the abortion clinic or whatever, and I will never allow them to pay me. Uh, because it's as busy as I am and as heavy as my heart is for the life issues and fighting against abortion. um I just can't devote, because my unique charism is on a particular trajectory. I can't make my life about that, but what I can do is kind of give back in that cause. So I never charge to provide any whether I'm speaking or music for the Diocese of Toledo or Catholic Charities here in Toledo.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And so, what other things are Awaken Catholic doing? Because I remember at one point you were doing podcasts. You had live events.
Hmm.
Do you still have that studio space in the mall? Is that still?
That's where I am right
Okay,
now.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
can guess see the background now. Yeah. So, so what kinds of things are you still doing then with Awaken Catholics? I know there's been several iterations of what you're doing. So, what are some of the things that people can like maybe go onto your website or and take a look at the different the service array of things that Awaken Catholic is offering?
Sure. So at the beginning of the year in January, we went into a production freeze. We didn't cancel our array of shows. We just froze production because we realized that we we needed to reassess how we were funding our operations. And so we are right now doing a soft re-entry into production. And we have some episodes of some of our shows that we're in the middle of editing. But we're going to be entering into a campaign soon to kind of come back full force. Excuse me, come back full force into what we were doing with the media side of things and do it better than we've ever done it. But that's going to require funding it. So we're going to have this campaign that's coming up. We also do, like you said, live events. We have this thing called Awaken Theater. What's behind me is actually our lounge, where we also sometimes record some things. So the setup that you see back there, if you're watching this on YouTube, is it's set up because we just recorded a show there recently. That's our lounging area. We have a bar there, and then on the other side of the space is Awaken Theater. And so we can seat a couple hundred people here, and we've had you out here for an event. We've had Dr. Christopher West, and so, anyways, yeah, we're doing a lot of stuff. We're trying to kick butt for the kingdom, as they say.
So we talk about the media side. What does that look like? Are we talking podcasts? Are we talking about streaming, like a television streaming kind of thing? What are we talking about? YouTube or other social media? What are we talking about there?
Okay, so I can reveal part of the answer to that. So,
Okay.
is that kind of what you were trying to
Stay
pry out of
tuned.
me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we do stream online. We do publish audio and video versions of all of our shows. But coming up soon, we will be, God willing, launching a new app called Apostle that we have been building for a couple of years, and we are hoping that it is game-changing for the entire Catholic media world.
All right. So Nick, real quick, how can people reach out to you and find out more about what you're doing?
awakencatholic.org.
All right, real simple, awakencatholic.org. I want to thank my guest, Nick de LaTorra, today on being a beacon of truth. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about Catholics and social media. Remember, you can stream today's show by visiting Podcast Central at EWTN.com/radio. And until we are together again, my friends, may Almighty God bless you, keep you, and protect you. The Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.